It's recording.
Okay, so we have to say that the session is being recorded. That way everyone knows that for those who speak up. But let's get started. So hi everyone, my name is David Estrin. I am the founder and CEO of Together We Remember. I am so excited to be hosting this kickoff webinar with our past community organizers as well as new and interested potential community organizers. This is the 7th year that we've been organizing a Together We Remember campaign, and it's definitely going to be the biggest and best campaign that we've organized yet. So when we get started, for kicking this off, I'd love to do a round of introductions with the leaders of the campaign who are on the line with you today. And I'll get to my story soon enough, so I want to pass it off to Katie first. Katie?
Hey guys, so I'm Katie. I go to Walsh University in Northeast Ohio. I'm graduating in April, which is a little scary, but I've spent the last 3 months in Washington, D.C. working with IACT and the Carl Wilkins Fellowship on refugee-led education programs along with genocide prevention bills. So I'm really excited to be joining the TWR team as campaign coordinator, meaning that I'll pretty much be your point of contact when it comes to recruiting, planning, and any role of support that I can offer to all of you. But I'm very excited and can't wait to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Would love to pass it over to Farida with Stand.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Farida, and I am Stand's National Outreach Coordinator. Some of you may have been in contact with me previously. I do lots of new chapter outreach for STAND, which is the student-led movement to end mass atrocities. In case you aren't familiar with our work, we've been partners with David and Together We Remember for a while now. And yeah, we have a lot of our chapters that hold Together We Remember events every year. And it's a regular thing that they like to participate in. So hopefully some of you new people will also like to join us in this really cool event.
Awesome, thank you, Farida. Yeah, I have to say that if it weren't for Stand, Together Remember would not be where it is today. I reached out to Stand originally a couple years ago, and I met Mac Hamilton, who's the current director, and Savannah Wooten, who is now the student director. And we had, I think, 5 or so communities who participated 2 years ago, and now we have over 24 that have participated, and that's very much in large part thanks to Stand, who've helped us build out our website and materials, so big props to Stand. All right, so what are we gonna talk about today on this webinar? So a couple of different things. First off, we just did a round of intros of our leadership team who are driving the campaign forward. I'm also gonna share a bit about an overview of Together Remember, and I'll do that by sharing my personal story and how we've gotten here to this moment today as Together We Remember as a collective. And then I'll get into some more tactical details about what it takes to organize a really successful Together We Remember Vigil. We'll walk through the Together We Remember website, which has a lot of really great resources, including the organizer's guide, which will be your go-to source for all things related to organizing your event. And we'll also talk about a couple of case studies or just examples to spark the imagination. So if Andrea from Northwestern joins us, she's the co-president of Stand at Northwestern. They organized their first event last year and it was a huge success. If she ends up joining us, then I'll pass it over to her and she'll tell you a little bit about her experience. Otherwise, I'm happy to tell you a little bit about what they did. And then after that, we'll open the floor to your questions. The time is yours. And this is really all about building community, getting energized, getting united and excited for what we're gonna do together in April, because it's gonna totally be really, really special. Nothing that we've ever really done or seen before across the globe. So let's jump right into my story. And I've got a couple of slides here to cover that, and then we'll go into the website. So Farida, can you just confirm, do you see this, the first slide?
Yep. Good to go.
Cool. So my story begins well before I was born. It begins with my grandparents. And the most important thing to know about me is that all 4 of my grandparents survived the Holocaust in profoundly different ways. And that really was the context for my upbringing. So on my dad's side, my grandparents were partisans. So they were part of the Jewish brigade that fought in the Russian army in the forests of Lithuania. And they fought for 3 years. And then on my mom's side, my grandmother was in the Budapest ghetto, and she was saved by a man named Raoul Wallenberg, who is a Swedish diplomat who bribed Nazis with diamonds and a mountain's worth of money, and he got diplomatic papers and would move Jewish families from house to house under protection. And that's how my grandma survived. And then my grandfather survived the Auschwitz and Mauthausen concentration camps. But, advancing into chapter 2, my apprenticeship as a steward of memory, so to speak, really began when I was 13, right after my bar mitzvah. So as you can tell, in 2004, my bar mitzvah, things were going quite well. It was definitely, the peak of my existence to that point. But things changed quite quickly when I found myself in my grandpa's concentration camp for the first time. And that experience was really the spark for all of this, because it was the first time that I felt self-aware of feeling empathy for another human being. And it just so happened it was my grandfather. He was my hero for all my life. And yet there we were, and he was barely able to hold himself up, and he really relied on me to get through that day. And there was almost like a role shift at that moment in time. I realized that at some point in time, it would be my responsibility to carry on and honor his memory and that of many others who had perished in the Holocaust and other genocides and atrocities. So that day he really sparked a flame in me, which would reveal my responsibility to fulfill those promises of never forget and never again. And that journey would continue. I met the liberators who freed his camp, the men of the 11th Armored Division. This is the hat my grandpa would wear when he attended their reunions. And it was amazing to meet like the Band of Brothers guys, the guys who landed in Normandy and liberated his camp. And then I went back again to Auschwitz in 2009 on the March of the Living, which was an incredible program with young Jewish kids all over the world. He led those trips 6 times, right? He shared his story with thousands of young people, and it always opened hearts and minds in a way that I was so enthralled by. But my grandpa passed away eventually in 2012 when I was a junior at Duke, and we found that he left behind multiple binders of our family's documents. So right now what you're looking at is a registry of sorts. It showed different prisoners in his concentration camp, and we found this in one of those binders. And these marks that you see were actually left by him. So if you see 67232, and there's a line through that, that's my great-grandfather who was murdered. And all these other names are on this list of people who perished. And to me, I was amazed to think that life and death would be in someone's hands simply with the stroke of a pen. But if you look at this list and you see 67245, and I have this number right here, which was the number that my grandfather wore in concentration camp, you can tell that's one of the few names that are not crossed out. And so to me, when I saw this list, it really affirmed that how precious my life was, and that I would have to do something to honor the memory of all of these folks here who didn't get a chance to do this amazing work that we're talking about here today. So I wondered when I was a junior at Duke, after my grandpa had passed, I said, how can I honor my grandpa's memory in a way that would be relevant and meaningful to the Duke community, but also future generations? And well, there were a couple of things that I noticed. First off, the Muslim chaplain at Duke University, a man named Imam Abdullah Antepli, who's an incredible leader in the Muslim community, he asked me if I had any ideas for how we could bring the Jewish and Muslim communities together. And at the time, Israel and Palestine were at war, and that was a very tense situation on campus. At the same time, I realized that at Duke, there was no Holocaust Remembrance Day program. Something used to exist, but it didn't exist at that moment in time. And then I also knew that at UNC, they did a 24-hour name reading vigil on Holocaust Remembrance Day. But I thought, who shows up to that? Probably mostly the Jewish community. But what would it take to get other folks to come from different religions and backgrounds and identities? So we came up with an idea that we would host a name reading vigil in the most central part of Duke's campus, right in front of the Duke Chapel. And we would read the names not just of victims of the Holocaust, but of victims of different genocides and atrocities. So Armenians, Cambodians, Rwandans, Bosnians, and the list goes on. And what do you know? We were able to recruit well over 200 people to read the names of folks for up to what became 24 hours in our second year of doing the event. And not only that, it also created the space for all these other events to happen. So we were doing exhibitions, survivor testimonials, scholarly lectures, community dialogues, personal pledges about who, what, why people thought remembering was important, musical performances, art projects, and the list goes on. And so we thought, what if we could do what we did at Duke all over the world and at the same time, and then share that experience live on social media? Would that be, what then would be possible? Could we create a positive wave showing what humanity can be at its best, and then use that as a springboard to reignite a movement to end violent hatred in all of its different forms, whether it's in the form of genocide or hatred like we're seeing on the rise here in the United States. I went off and graduated and worked in the corporate world for a while. I won't dwell on that. But I eventually realized that I had to come back to building out Together We Remember. I noticed that, you know, in addition to really wanting to pursue that vision, I noticed, and I'm sure you do too, intensifying displays of dangerous speech in our communities and online, deepening violent conflicts, you know, for example, what you see in Syria, ongoing atrocities committed with impunity. Think about the 600,000 refugees that are currently trapped in Bangladesh right now, that were chased from their homes, that were burnt down. And of course, the worst refugee crisis in history, with over 65 million people displaced from their homes. And so I left my job in corporate America, and now I'm really proud to say that Together We Remember is a real nonprofit organization. Signed on the dotted line, we're kosher with Uncle Sam. And I won't go into our promo video here. You can watch that some other time. So what happened? We expanded thanks to the help of Stand and other partners that we brought to the table. And last April, Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, 26 communities across 3 continents, 4 countries, participated and organized Together Remember vigils in their community. These were high schools, universities, museums, religious communities, or so like synagogues, mosques, etc., and you know, folks in their own like corporate offices as well. For example, in London, we had someone in their nonprofit office participate. And so that really showed what was the art of the possible. A couple of highlights. In Baltimore, we had Senator Ben Cardin, who's the ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee. You see that picture on the left. He was standing next to me reading names of the victims of all the different genocides and atrocities that we've documented in our database, which is now over 180,000 names. And so that was really showing us what could be possible in terms of engaging our elected leaders. Then at USC, we had a survivor of the Rwandan genocide who shared part of her memoir, and that was a really powerful experience. Also at USC, we screened a virtual reality film, so as students walked by, they could watch a 10-minute film called Behind the Fence, which is now nominated for an Academy Award. And it showed the plight of the Rohingya people at the time. And we also had young people participate all the way in Congo as well, which showed the possibilities globally. I also shared this Together We Remember personal statement, which says, "Together we remember to have faith in humanity." And I share that because we had hundreds of people who filled out those sorts of statements. And that one was just really, that one was honestly my favorite because it was so positive. And you know, I read so many of them. For example, I know Louise, you're on the line, and I spoke at the John Carroll High School recently, and we had the students fill out their own Together We Remember statements on these Post-its, and they're just so incredibly powerful. Every single person wrote a very special statement, and so I just wanted to show you guys that, similar to that one. In San Francisco, we had a nonprofit called No Mirror Movement. They coordinated an impromptu dance in a children's playground at midnight and played a really special song to it, and they posted it live on Facebook. And then Northwestern organized their first vigil, a 12-hour vigil, I think, and the mayor of Evanston participated in that. They sent me the newspaper and autographed it. It was awesome to receive that. And of course, we also launched our virtual living memorial. So if you go to the Together We Remember website right now, you could see that the names of those victims and those 180,000 victims are rolling 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And that's important because so many of these folks don't have a final resting place, but they do on our website. And in each of the vigils that we organize and host, when we say those names out loud in time and space as they carry through our communities, those folks, their memory is still alive. And that virtual memorial also showed how all of our communities were transforming remembrance into action, because they used the Together Remember hashtag, and then we were able to see all the different activities that were going on around the world at the same time, which was super cool. And I have this visual here to give you a sense of the scope of the problem. So this is a map of the number of hate groups per state in the United States, according to the Southern Poverty and Law Center. Every state has recognized hate groups. And so I wonder, what if we could organize Together We Remember vigils in every one of these states? It's not necessarily saying it's a silver bullet, but it's saying that we're showing up, that we're ready to fight hate in our own backyards. And I truly believe that peace building starts at home. It begins in your local community before we can really take an effective step towards peace building abroad. So what if we could turn that map full of those hate groups into a map that looks like this, right? That is the vision that we're hoping to build here at Together We Remember, to get everyone on the bus of this movement. And then we're gonna figure out together where to take it year over year, again and again, until we can truly say that never forget and never again counts for all humanity. So that's a bit of the background of Together Remember, my story of how we got to this present moment. And now what I want to do is shift over to the Together Remember website, which if you haven't pulled up yet, I'd love for you to do so. I'm going to share the link in our chat box. I can't actually do that. Katie, if you could share the link, that would be awesome. But it's simply togetherweremember.org. If you Google it, we're like the first 6 or 7 results, which is awesome. If you pull up the website, you can actually play around with it in real time along with me. And what I want to show you is the organizer's guide. It's the most important part of our website. Like I said, we've been doing this for, now it's our 7th year, and so this is all of our collective wisdom from those different vigils, and it's been crowdsourced from previous organizers. So it covers what Together Remember is all about, what the organizer's guide is, and really to organize a successful Together We Remember event, we mapped out these 8 different steps. And it's pretty straightforward. First off, you get connected. So you sign up on the Together Remember website, and then we'll get on a call like this, and Katie would probably walk you through the organizer's guide in more detail and talk about the different steps to make your event happen, and do a little bit of brainstorming, and also get connected on our social media. Then you would build your team, right? So to make an amazing event happen, you got to have some manpower. Some folks have organized them solo, which is really impressive, but it really is great to have a team. We have some recommendations for what really leads to building a strong team, some typical roles that are good to fill. And then the third step is to design your event, right? So there's two different types of events that you can organize. Really simply, you could just organize a name reading vigil, for example. We provide a spreadsheet that you can send to your community, and people can sign up to read names for, let's say, 10-minute time blocks. And we'll share our name reading app, and it's on the app that you simply tap the screen on an iPhone or a laptop or an iPad, and you'll see all the different names popping up one by one that you could read one after the other for anywhere from 1 hour to 24 hours, like some of our communities do. But there's also the other type of event that you could do, which is a more complex event, which is the vigil, perhaps, but also complementary events like what I referred to before, maybe an interfaith prayer with faith leaders in your community, or a musical performance, or poetry. Really, it's up to you. What we say here is, your community is your own canvas, and how you design your event is totally up to you, as long as you honor the principle of an inclusive event. You're shining a light on multiple atrocities, genocides, cases of violent hatred that have happened throughout history, as a way of saying, never forget and never again. Don't just count for the Armenians or the Jewish community or the Muslim community, but for all people across humanity. So we could talk more about that down the line, and I invite you to check out the Design Your Event page. Then I won't go into too much more detail, but you need a budget to know how much an event is going to cost depending on the design, and you want to recruit sponsors to help cover those costs. Events can run anywhere from maybe a couple hundred or a couple $100, or all the way up to several $1,000s, depending on how fancy it is. Like if you want to bring Beyonce and you have the money, awesome. It's probably going to be a challenge. But one day we'll get Beyonce. Trust me, we've got our spreadsheet with different celebrities that we want to, and performers that we want to engage down the road. After that, though, you'll want to actually arrange your event logistics. We've got some resources for that. You'll want to market your event. And then finally, there's just like those last minute day of or preparations. And in that page, you'll see a lot of different recommendations. Because like I said, we've seen everything that goes right and wrong in these events regarding the venue, the equipment, signage. You know, it might rain, so you probably want to have a rain plan. One of your speakers might break, so you probably want to have a second one, things like that. I won't go into too much detail, but definitely explore the organizer's guide when you get a chance. And then the final step is simply following up with your communities, thanking them, and then we'll follow up with you to learn how it went and you know, share share documentation of what happened. I should also note, we encourage everyone who hosts an event to use the Together Remember hashtag on either Twitter or Facebook. You can live stream your event. You can get folks to share a Together Remember statement like I showed you before, and then share those online. And then if you share it with the Together Remember hashtag, all that stuff will then go into our virtual memorial, which will be super cool to see across all the different communities. So that's the organizer's guide. I know there's a lot in there, so I don't want to go into too much detail to make your head explode. Yeah, at this point, I want to talk about just a couple of different events that we organized in the past. So, for example, at a museum, we organized an incredible event at the Jewish Museum of Maryland. I mentioned that we had Senator Ben Cardin who came to that event, and so Senator Cardin shared some remarks about policies he was advocating for to hold Assad accountable for the atrocities he was committing in Syria. Just the day before that, he had committed a chemical weapons attack. So it was really important and timely that we had Senator Cardin there to talk about different policies, including the Genocide and Atrocity Prevention Act, which I could tell you about another time. It's definitely going to be part of our focus this coming year. But we also had a musical performance, and we had a grassroots symphony orchestra perform pieces of composers who had perished in past genocides, which was really special. And then we started a name reading vigil, and we did that for 2 hours. And then we had people write on Post-its what they remembered, who they remembered, why they remembered, and that ended up leading to a really cool community art project of sorts. And we did that all in a museum that was an old synagogue, and it really was special because it's one of the oldest synagogues in the country, so we breathed new life into it. So that's one example of how we organized an event. At a high school, students invited their teachers to, in each period, lead their class by sharing the story of someone who had either survived or was an upstander who saved people's lives. So imagine as a student, you would go through 6 or 8 periods and you would hear the story of someone who was involved or survived or saved lives in a different genocide or atrocity in every class, which was really special. And then morning announcements had name readings involved, and in between periods there was name readings going on, as well as advocacy opportunities that Stan was highlighting at the time. And let's see, I talked about a high school, a museum, Northwestern. So Northwestern in their first year did a 12-hour vigil. They raised, I think, $220 or so on a crowdfunding campaign, and they also got about $250 from the university. And then with that funds, they reserved some speaker equipment. They invited a leading activist who was advocating on behalf of the Rohingya population to speak about the crisis in Myanmar. They had a teacher, a professor who was doing research with the Holocaust Museum, talk about the ethics of remembrance. And then they also had a survivor deliver a testimony. And then they did a 12-hour vigil. And then the mayor came and participated in that vigil as well. I would also add something really exciting about that event and special was a member of the community shared the list of the names of victims of the Sand Creek Massacre of Native Americans that happened in the 1800s. And we were actually able to incorporate that list into our database. So we're showing you how we're crowdfunding the names of and the stories of the victims of different atrocities throughout history. So that event was just really a huge success, and Stan at Northwestern will be joining us again this year, hopefully for maybe even a 24-hour event. So I've been doing a lot of speaking, and I hope I've been able to spark your imagination and tell you a little bit about how we got to this point as a campaign and a movement, and showed you, what it could look like in your community, depending on what type of community you represent. But now what I'd love to do is open the floor to you guys, to any and all questions that you have that I can clarify. This time is yours. This is really informal. We're going to be, building out this community and probably even hosting these vigils weekly until the end of, not vigils, sorry, these webinars until the end of, until the holiday season starts. So the time is yours. Let's hear what you have. You can come off of mute and ask your question, or you can type it in the chat window. Any questions? I'll go over a few that usually come up, and if anyone has any, just jump right in or type into the chat box. But usually communities ask, where we get our names from and our stories, and how we choose which genocides or atrocities and cases to recognize. And so to cover that, we have done a lot of research. We originally realized that, the first year we did this, we reached out to the Holocaust Museum in DC, Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel, and others around the world. And we realized that each of these museums didn't have a comprehensive database of names of victims and upstanders from different genocides and atrocities. So it would be up to us to actually compile that database, which we have done. And so we reached out to different memorial, memory and documentation centers around the world, like the Kigali Genocide Memorial in Rwanda, the Armenian Genocide Museum in Yerevan, Armenia. In some cases, we got the names of these victims, and they weren't in English. They were in Armenian, and that was really challenging. It enlisted the help of Armenian students at Duke and in LA to help us translate that list. And we continue to do that sort of research, a lot of web research as well. In terms of how we choose which genocides and atrocities to focus on, it's really inclusive. We take a really wide approach, and we've actually expanded our scope to not simply genocides and atrocities, but all forms of violent hatred, because the world has been shifting so quickly, and we see the ugly face of hatred here at home in the United States as well as abroad. So we're going to also be commemorating victims of extremism and terror. So for example, what happened in Charlottesville, we'll be going about, so we're going to be going about it in a more inclusive way, victims from 9/11, and so on. So that's part of where we get our names from. Another question we usually get is why April? And so April is Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, and April is a time where the Holocaust is typically commemorated on Holocaust Remembrance Day. The Rwandan genocide is typically commemorated on April 8th, and the Armenian genocide is usually on April 25th. So that's a really busy time for genocide and atrocity prevention work. And much like Black History Month and other sorts of month-long campaigns, we really want to elevate genocide and atrocity prevention, genocide awareness and prevention month to that similar level, and then use the campaign as a vehicle every single year to focus and amplify our voices, because it's hard to hold people's attention all year long. So that covers that question.
If I'm not mistaken, I think someone had a question, or it was just really low volume.
Oh, really? Okay.
This is awkward if no one had a question, but like I thought I heard a little something, something. Okay, maybe not. Okay, I'm sorry. But Andrea is on.
Yeah. Oh, great. Hey there. I think, yeah, we had a little time zone problem. I think she's in the central time zone. but I would love to turn it over to you. Andrea, are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, welcome.
Sorry about that. Completely my fault about the timing.
No worries.
But hi.
I covered a little bit of what happened at Northwestern, but if you want to talk a little bit about what your guys' experience was like as a new community organizing a Together Remember event for your first time, what were some of the ups and downs? What were some of the high points? And talk about your experience in terms of using the organizer's guide and if it was helpful at all.
Yeah, for sure. Can you see me on a webcam or no? Just out of curiosity. Or am I just audio?
You have to share your webcam. If you go.
Oh, okay. There we go. Awesome. Sorry about that. So to start this off, I guess, so I was approached by my friend, Ben Chase. He's not here right now, but he approached me, was it March of last year, and he told me about this event because he got in touch with you, David, and he wanted to put on this event, and we were just friends. I didn't know much about it. Showed me the intro video to Together We Remember, and I was on board, and so we got 3 other students to get involved, and we basically had only 2.5 months to put on the event, which is actually not a lot of time. So I think the time crunch for us to actually put it all together was our main obstacle. And coordinating how much money we had to raise, that was difficult because we weren't a student group on campus, so we couldn't get funding through the school. So we had to get family and friends to donate money to us. And then just organizing, where we can have the event, who will be speaking. It was all just, I think, timing was the biggest problem, was that we had to make sure we did all this stuff in orderly fashion and in a very quick way and make sure that it ran smoothly. And in the end, I think our event was a really great success for the amount of time we had and the resources that we had. We did a 12-hour long name reading event. I was able to coordinate a Holocaust survivor to come and speak. The mayor of Evanston was able to come and read names. We also had a woman that worked with the Burmese task force in Chicago to come and speak as well, and also a professor at Northwestern to come and speak, who is a part-time professor, part-time curator at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. So I think the event itself was a great success, just the turnout of people that actually came to read names. We were worried that because we only had half of the list filled out, meaning we didn't have 2 people per slot to read names, that people wouldn't show up. But I think overall we only had 2 people not show up out of like the 90 slots that we had filled. So that was a really good success. And next coming April, we are definitely planning on having 2 people per slot to come and read names. We also made merchandise like stickers and backpack buttons, so we'll have more of those. I think just coordinating other speakers, not just Holocaust survivors, but also other survivors from different genocides and mass atrocities to come and speak. So, yeah.
I think to me, the coolest part was the fact that you didn't have that much time, and yet you were still able, in just a matter of weeks, to pull together a team, to raise a bit of money, and then you actually made an event happen, and you had the mayor of your city to come. So imagine, for example, this year you could contact the mayor again and say, hey, would you be willing to pass a resolution with the city council to recognize April as Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month? I feel pretty good about something like that happening, and then that opens the window for even more sort of policy advocacy opportunities, institutionalizes the program, and the fact that you only had 2 out of like 90 or so people who didn't show up just showed like how invested people were in this. And they didn't even really know who you were until they showed up, and that happened at
it was raining that day. It was pouring rain. Wow. So, and our event was outside, and the fact that people still showed up to read names is pretty impressive. So, yeah, awesome. I think also one idea that we're thinking of implementing this April for TWR is after people read names, or people that just come by to our spot for the event, we want to make these note cards in which it'll have information on maybe a person from a select genocide, maybe like an article or some place they can get for more information on that, and like a key takeaway or key question they should think about after coming to our event. Just to keep that, just like not after seeing it, just seeing it being there and being moved, but then like take the dialogue further after the event.
I love that. And so what I love about this is that you're showing us precisely that principle of like, really your event is up to you to design. And, I'm so excited to hear that every community takes it in a different direction a little bit, but we're all doing it with similar values that are guiding us. And then, you guys will, I'm sure, again, use the hashtag and share your experiences live as they're happening. And then we can see all over the world, when we say together, remember, how people are making it relevant and meaningful to the local context of everyone's communities. And so that's an example of that. The other thing I think about is when we talk about hands, sort of say it's not one day, but day one of a much larger project and engagement. And I know that you guys have been thinking about different ways to continue the dialogue, to continue the conversation. A real concrete way that you guys did that was you started a stand chapter, right? So you talked about how the first time you organized an event, you weren't a student group, so it was harder to get funding. Now you are a student group, so it'll be that much easier. And once you started a stand chapter, you were able to be involved in like stands advocacy programs and efforts all year long. So this is exactly what this is all about, right? This is about getting more new energy into the movement and then carrying it on throughout the year in a way that is sustainable. And now you guys are ready to come back at it again, and way easier this time.
Yeah, Ben's very excited, so it'll be good, really good. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I love that I thought about this kind of late. I know I invited you very last minute to speak about your experience, but I'm super excited that we did. I think it was a really good idea. Now, in the interest of time, I don't want to keep you guys that much longer. I know it's getting late. So I want to open the floor just one more time if anyone has any other follow-up questions, and then we can call things for today and get back to what we were doing.
I just have a question while we have Paul Stark. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I just have some questions for some of the other chapters out there and for some of the groups working with Stand. What kinds of advocacy work have your campuses done in ways that have got students to mobilize and do things off campus or on campus through media, email, whatever? What are some of the things you're doing?
Yeah. Farida, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So that is actually a great question, and that's a lot of what Stand does. It's part of our approach to kind of dealing with these conflicts. And from personal experience, I have a chapter at the University of Maryland where I go to school, and we actually hosted kind of a call-in day for a Yemen campaign to raise awareness about the Yemen issue. Our chapter is relatively new, so we haven't had a chance to host a Together We Remember event, but it could work in the same way where we had students come by. We had a table in front of like the student union where there's like a lot of traffic coming through, and we had a script ready for them prepared by Stand National. And all they had to do was call into their representatives' offices and ask them to support a particular piece of legislation relating to the Yemen conflict. We also have people writing op-eds, most recently related to the Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act, which is being introduced in both the House and the Senate. And we also host other call-ins. We have letters to the editor sometimes where we write letters to various editors of newspapers, online news forums, and things like that. We also do lobbying. That's like a huge part of what Stand does. We had a lobbying weekend a few weekends ago, I think 2 or 3 weekends ago, where we invited people to come to DC we gave them a 1-day like crash course into lobbying. And then the day after, we went on Capitol Hill and actually had them lobby for legislation for genocide prevention. So those are the different kinds of things we're doing. Yeah.
I would also add, there's one more campaign that I found really exciting to follow, which is the Rise to Rohingya campaign that Stand has led. And they were basically doing a fundraiser through a variety of like creative approaches to fundraising, like guerrilla marketing tactics, but fundraising to invest in organizations that are on the ground in Myanmar, serving the Rohingya population. And so that's a really awesome campaign that Stand has been running. I'm pretty sure most, if not all, of the proceeds have been going directly to those organizations. So that's been really important as well. So it's not just advocacy, but there's also some fundraising stuff that's been going on. And the one thing I would say about Stan's advocacy work, which is awesome, and I've been appreciative of participating in it, because it's very much like exercising your civic muscles, right? I had not ever called my senator or congressman until I joined, and it was really nerve-wracking the first time, but making that phone call the first couple times, then it became more of a habit for me to be involved from a civic engagement perspective as a citizen. Same thing with letter writing. I've also seen some Stand members who've written op-eds, and actual congressmen will quote or say that it was reading that op-ed from one of their constituents that convinced them to support a particular bill, which is unbelievable. I think that was what happened for Senator Tom Tillis in North Carolina after he read an op-ed that Savannah Wooten from University of North Carolina, and then Matt King, who's a student at Duke, they both co-wrote together. So really cool stuff that I think would be great. I mean, Paul, thinking about students at Heidelberg for things that could be done to get students engaged from like an Ohio State perspective.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Grace, I know, I see you on the line. So Grace did something really incredible last year. She is an incredible artist, and she organized an interactive exhibit that involved the names, using like over 50,000 names from our database and hanging strings and projecting the names onto those strings, and you could walk through that exhibit, like low light, but really special. And so we have some pictures of that. That was an example of something like out of the box that a community did last year. So I see you, Grace. Thank you for that. Hope we work with you again this year.
Definitely. I'm excited to do something more this year.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we've been on the line for a good 40 minutes. Seems like we've covered questions. I've thought of what are the most common there. We also have a frequently asked questions section on our website, which I welcome you to check out. Remember, there's the organizer's guide, and there's a media page which has a bunch of videos and other sort of like newspaper articles that have been written about some of the different community events we've done. And finally, if you have not yet signed up your community and you're interested in hosting a vigil, definitely please do so ASAP after the call or whenever you're ready, and then we'll send you those extra materials and Katie will be in touch with you. And that is about it. I think, Katie, I covered that part. Sorry, I think you were supposed to talk.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm excited to work with all of you.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for sharing your time tonight. And this is the first webinar, and you'll hear from us, and reach out anytime you have a question. We're here to help. Let's make some awesome stuff happen. All right. Pri, you can go ahead and end the recording.